Good afternoon once again, dear participants. We are on the third webinar by Agape Diagnostics Limited, and this webinar is titled COVID-19, Combating COVID-19 with Hematology. The topic is intended to cover uh, or to offer a clear view on the best practices followed in the field of hematology and throw light on the factors to be considered while selecting a hematology analyzer with specific focus on COVID-19. We have an eminent resource person for this webinar. He's none other than Dr. Vijay Parikh, Scientific Advisor of Agape Diagnostics Limited. Dr. Vijay Parikh graduated in microbiology and went on to receive his MSc for his research on inherited bleeding disorders. He was a recipient of international scholarship from Angelo Bianchi Bonomi Trust and International Hemophilia Training Center at University of Milano, Italy, where he pursued research on inherited bleeding disorders with particular emphasis on hemophilia. In 1981, he obtained PhD from the University of Bombay for his research on variants of hemophilia B and detection of its carriers. In 1989, Dr. Parikh joined the scientific arm of in vitro diagnostic industry in India, working extensively on spreading awareness on effective use of automated hematology analyzers. From 1996, he moved on to work with international IVD manufacturers in Singapore, Japan, and China. Besides focusing on R&D in cellular analysis, he has delivered talks and conducted more than 250 seminars from national and international platforms. A hearty welcome to you, sir, to this session. Over to Dr. Vijay Parikh for this session, please.
Thank you, Vinith. It's my pleasure to be here with so many people joining on this webinar. It is wonderful to have the technology help us while we are enclosed in our own environments at home or offices. And yes, I have been attending the webinars also from other presenters. And I think it's a wonderful platform to really catch up with each other during this time of stress as well as learning. So today I have to talk about the basic hematology parameters and what is their role in combating COVID-19 infection. Along with hematology results, of course, we are going to talk about some routine other tests as well. So can I have the first slide, please? So let's begin talking about the role of CBC parameters in detection and management of COVID-19 infection. I'll be taking you through the basic information that is also available on the web, as well as also review some of the published data already from various countries on basic parameters, and then at the end summarize and conclude. So let's begin with the presentation for the first part of it. Understanding COVID-19, the available resources and data for COVID-19 diagnosis. We all are affected globally with this COVID-19 pandemic, which is really a big, major global health crisis. But also, interestingly, it is not the first of its kind. Just about 102 years back, Spanish flu of 1918 caused devastation and cost more than 10 crore lives worldwide. History is also replete with many such past pandemics that have caused devastation of life on a much larger scale. And friends, we are not counting the famines, the nature's fury, and the wars, and the partition for our country, for example. Still, COVID-19 is a real big challenge, and it is challenging our faith and pride in the modern healthcare that has been built over last century. This is fairly well known to everyone. We had coronavirus infections in the past. In 2002, we had SARS, that affected the Asian countries. More than 8,000 people were affected with a mortality rate close to 10%. Followed by Middle East respiratory syndrome, also caused by coronavirus, which was mainly restricted to the Middle East region, Africa, and it had a very high mortality rate of almost 35%. And third, coronavirus pandemic, COVID, is now causing a global devastation, and that is our subject of the day. First, as everyone knows, it was reported in Wuhan, China, somewhere early December, reported at the end of the December month. It is spreading very fast, making it very difficult to catch up with the global ramification as they are unfolding every day, every minute, I would say. Almost 85% of people affected, unfortunately, are asymptomatic, and they create a big challenge of deciding whom to test. Diagnostic strategies are still evolving. As we already know in our own country, we have been seeing the updates, and that's why we are now in lockdown number 4. Treatment modalities are also not very clear. Treatment is sometimes based on anecdotal evidence. Sometimes it is suffering seriously from the paucity of data. And unfortunately, but the reality is that the world is forced to learn on the job. It is challenging political leaders all around the world. To complicate the matters, social media and exchange of information, quite often fake or anecdotal, is creating unintentional confusion. Taking the data of 17th May, 10 a.m. US time, globally we have already seen 4.5 million cases with close to 300,000 deaths, which are increasing every day. The data of WHO doesn't really reflect the Indian, but that is the last but second line of South and Southeast Asia, in which the WHO is reporting that we have 134,000 cases and deaths of 4,300 odd people. So moving to the next slide, the primary resources that we require to diagnose and manage the disease are primarily the RT-PCR test, which tests the RNA of the virus. The purpose for this is to make a diagnosis. It is considered as the golden reference method. It is also used as confirmatory test. ICMR has approved it. Availability was an issue, but it is improving rapidly. And now more than 200,000 tests are being done daily. The negative part of this testing is about 25% of them are false negatives. It also has a long turnaround time. The delay is causing confusion and managing the people who are put into quarantine while their results are awaited. Imports and costs are also an issue because we still have to depend on the imports of RT-PCR kits from various sources. Something like 12 to 13 different sources are available. And now ICMR approval has zoomed down to few of them and not all of them. The second option used by several countries successfully, like South Korea, for example, is a rapid antibody test. Its primary purpose is screening, surveillance, and epidemiology. It helps in detecting exposure of people to recent infection and their seroconversion. After approving it on 14th April, ICMR withdrew its approval on 24th of April, and currently the antibody screening test is not being used. Availability was also an issue, and I do not know how it is going to be handled once it is approved. But it does offer certain advantage, like a shorter turnaround time, so it's very quick. Reliability is not really an issue, but still that also depends on imports from other countries, while very rapidly some Indian companies have come up with the options which should be in the market before we see the end of COVID. So is a schematic diagram, if I have to show, then the coronavirus the epidemiology can be done by the antibody screening test. If it has infected a person, then it requires a diagnosis. And therefore, RT-PCR would be the only test available, is the only test available now. When the disease becomes overt and it is quite obvious, it requires a staging. Is it moderate, severe, or requiring intensive care unit admission? The tests which are used are also used for prognosticating the progress of the patient and also monitor the therapy that is being offered. Different options are being tried, but monitoring is done by the tests. Unfortunately, some of them will not see the end of the infection and go home. But fortunately, the recovery is not too bad, and we are seeing good success in people going home. Coming back to the PCR technique, we have almost 30% of false negatives. They do hamper diagnosis. They do not project the true extent of the pandemic. And unfortunately, they also create a higher chance of missing silent carriers who could spread the contagion without being detected. Hence, I think the strategy correctly would be to keep testing more suspects, trace all the contacts of those people who have been identified as infected, treat all the people who are sick and down with COVID, and continue to track and monitor their progress. Fortunately, the government of India did this reasonably early in time, and let us see if it brings us the dividends that we intend to have out of this. This was taken from one of the papers, Hindustan Times, on 15th. This is the data related to 15th of May, and in which the report says that we are testing something like 1,500 tests per million of population. We started with less than 100 tests per million. We have reached up to 1,500, and our aim is to keep increasing it. So therefore, with 1,500 tests per million, we have made a diagnosis in about 86,000 people, and we have seen death of 2,700 people out of those detected to have COVID infection. But considering that and comparing it with other countries who have suffered much more, for instance, Spain, Italy, UK, or Russia, you realize that we are doing much less testing. Now, is the current testing level sufficient to get the true picture? I leave the question open without having any answer to tell you. Will the increased testing with more vigorous attempts reveal a more grim picture to us? Again, we'll have to wait and see. This is from Times of India, in which they are showing that currently with the only RT-PCR test available, and these figures say that we have tested something like 251,000 cases in a day, out of which 12.5% are positive and the rest are negative. But when they bifurcate it to government and private labs, the figures say that the government labs are testing more, while private labs are detecting more, percentage-wise. I do not know what is related to these results. Are these issues of quality? Are these issues of cost? Again, I don't have any answers. But then, if RT-PCR is not available in more than 550 odd laboratories in the country today, don't we have other options? And I think we all know that we have the options of tests like CRP, complete blood count, or in advanced case, severe cases, also D-dimer and which reveals problems related to DIC. So C-reactive protein, which is responding to the inflammation present in the body, is a non-specific test, of course, but useful for monitoring. It is associated with severity of the disease, so it could be used later as well. Complete blood count shows us a picture which we will describe we'll see later in detail. It can indicate cytokine storm syndrome, thrombocytopenia. When it is present, it is heralding that, associated with severity and acute respiratory disease syndromes. Increased D-dimer and decreased fibrinogen are evidence that disseminated intravascular coagulation is set in, and they indicate an active CSS, cytokine storm, and they are associated with the severity of the disease. Taking a moment off and saying that we have to detect the crime. Then the police looks at it, the investigators look at it carefully, they inspect all the available evidence at the crime scene, they collect the clues, they use all available resources at their hand and follow it up with logical interpretation. And when we do that, it is more often than not that we'll catch the culprit. So moving on to the second part of the presentation about the complete blood count and other baseline tests. A brief information which every one of you are totally familiar with is that the circulation of blood several times in a minute throughout our body gets us, the CBC results reveal the real-time, almost real-time evidence of the changes that have taken place in vivo. Even though it is somewhat invasive, blood collection has become fairly safe and simple. Hematology analyzers are also available and they require very small quantities of blood, in fact, few microliters. And they rapidly provide unbiased and highly reproducible data. So therefore, that's the advantage of hematology analyzers, which every one of you are familiar with. So then, again, looking at the scientific way of how to reach the diagnostic bench is that when patient signs and symptoms are taken note of by the physician, a careful physical examination is done, the physician would form clinical impressions, which may or may not require clinical correlation with the lab data. But when the lab data is available, it helps confirm or rule out the initial impressions that the physician formed based on signs and symptoms, physical examination. And therefore, isn't this similar to investigating a crime? We are faced with a patient who has symptoms, and therefore we have to collect all the evidence that is available. Basic lab tests here would include a complete blood count, almost always exclusively done on hematology analyzer these days, either a erythrocyte sedimentation rate or a C-reactive protein, as many are turning to. The basic biochemistry profiles are also done by almost every laboratory now, either on fully automated analyzer or semi-automated, but biochemistry is also available in the smallest labs. So the test groups which help assess the organ functions, quick example would be like renal, liver, cardiac, or metabolic functions. Coagulation tests are also done in routine laboratories. Prothrombin time and A partial thromboplastin time are the common coagulation tests, not more than that. Clinical pathology for routine examination of urine and stool is also done by everyone. Here, it is not going to be discussed, but these are the basic tests that every laboratory does. And then if we link that information to the number of laboratories in India, estimated to be anything between 50 to 100,000 or even more, I do not know. Majority of the labs are present in districts and smaller towns. Of course, metro has the full extent of automation, and the most sophisticated instruments available worldwide are also available in our metros. But as I said earlier, analyzers are widely used for blood count, biochemistry, and routine tests. And users are familiar with rapid tests such as, for example, malaria or dengue, etc. Referring clinicians to these small labs also reasonably well understand the importance of this test. Interpretation of results is also gaining ground, although may not be very widely spread. But yes, the routinely available tests are utilized well now, and also in smaller area, smaller geographical locations. So importantly, basic tests are also performed in this 500 plus ICMR approved government and private labs who are doing COVID-19 testing. I'm sure they are not doing only the COVID test, but they are also doing the basic tests as well. So logical to use those tests if they are already available. The basic cellular analysis, as we all know, has evolved over several centuries, beginning with the use of microscope, available Romanowski's dyes availability, etc. And in the last century now, we know much more about the association between diseases and disorders and the changes that we see in the blood count parameters. So CBC analysis involves looking for changes in the hemoglobin level, blood counts, cell numbers, shapes, appearances, distribution, and other ratios that are easily available on almost every hematology analyzer. Due to the widespread automation of hematology analyzer, including in our countries, the poor reliability which was associated with the earlier techniques of doing blood count are no longer an issue. They are not even a threat. I doubt if we are still falling back on the basic technology, manual techniques anymore in our country also. So hence, the blood count helps to diagnose a disease, screen for an abnormality. Blood analysis also helps monitor the progress and benefit of the treatment that is being given to the patient. Hence, there is no doubt that blood count is one of the most ordered tests globally. Many users who take to automation when they move from the manual technology are in a dilemma of selecting a hematology analyzer. A small, brief way of looking at it would be that let us assume that the intention of anyone wanting to acquire a hematology analyzer is to improve over the present situation in their labs. Then it would call for inspection of the currently used technology, check those capabilities and limitations, what features and benefits will be available from the new analyzer that is being considered. One would definitely look at the manufacturer's information, supplier's reputation, service, local availability, and no interruption in supply would be some of the main features that one would be looking at. Parameters, of course, hematology analyzer without those parameters doesn't make any sense. So parameters, once they are available, one has to consider, will the new analyzer provide what we require now? Will it be reliable enough when the results are available? What are the opinions of people in similar locations and with similar background? That's important. You can't ask the fully automated hematology analyzer user about a semi-automated analyzer benefits. They may know it, but they may not be using it anymore. So therefore, those who are using similar equipment would be the right source to get opinion from, versatility of the analyzer that we are considering, will it meet my existing needs and also the future needs, which includes the number of samples also tested per day, and economics. Nothing works without the economy. E is the bottom line in even the intention of improving. So acquiring the hematology analyzer, or for that matter, any analyzer, and what will be the projected lifetime cost is also an important exercise that will be done. Okay, so let's move on to the third section. Hematology analyzer, role in COVID-19 diagnosis and its management. What is easily available on the internet thanks to the technology that we live in today? I went over the web and found there were several publications which help, and I've taken only few of them to represent and support the today's presentation. So let's look at that quickly and what the CBC and other tests are showing. Before coming to each study, here is a quick take on what is seen. Decreased total white cell count, but not necessarily always. Increased neutrophilia with absolute or relative sense. Lymphocytopenia in an absolute sense. Raised neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio. Mild thrombocytopenia, but not necessarily always. Almost absent or low eosinophils, and mild anemia. These are the common observations on the blood count results seen, and I'll take you through some of those studies that I have used. There is a very nice multi-center meta-analysis of the studies included from 2 centers in USA, 2 from Italy, and 1 from Brazil. It was published in Clinical Chem Lab Medicine just a few months back, and it is talking about 3,377 results, patients collected from 21 studies, and the lab parameters they used were 33. 18 studies compared severe cases versus non-severe, and 3 out of those 21 compared survivors with non-survivors. The larger study included about 3,000 patients, and the smaller one included about 4,000 patients. And without taking you through the small details that are available on the web anyway, I've tried to summarize for you that in severe or non-severe cases, or survivor versus non-survivor cases, the major differences were that the white cell count, neutrophils, enzymes like alkaline ALT or AST, LDH, C-reactive protein, procalcitonin, ferritin, D-dimer, prothrombin-TAM, and interleukin-6 are the tests which would show increase in severe cases or non-survivor cases, and decrease in lymphocytes, eosinophils, platelets, hemoglobin, and albumin in the non-severe, both increased of the first group and decrease of the lymphocyte group in severe or non-survivor cases. There is a separate study by David Ferrari from Italy, in which they included 207 cases, out of which the RT-PCR positive cases were 105, and the other half, almost 102, were non-negative for that. And their major findings, when summarized, show that the total white cell count could be low to normal. Lymphocytes show a decrease. Increase in C-reactive protein, AST, ALT, and LDH enzymes. And interestingly, when they use the cutoff of LDH value of more than 210 units per liter or AST of more than 35 per liter, they found that they could help in picking up a false negative RT-PCR test. So the conclusion of their study is that combining the appropriate cutoffs of LDH and AST with certain basic hematological parameters could help in identifying the false positive or false negative results from the RT-PCR and thereby optimize the scarce resources, which even in Italy, which is considered as one of the best healthcare systems in Europe, they really stretched their resources to the bare minimum, and they had to start making decisions which were very hard in normal times. So therefore, optimizing the scarce resources was their achievement when they looked at the basic parameters. Iran is another region which is closer to us, and they also saw a big numbers. They included 200 cases in their study. This was published by Rajab Mardani and his colleagues in Archives of Academic Emergency Medicine. Negative cases were 130, while the positive RT-PCR cases were 70. And their findings confirmed and correlate with the earlier findings, like the total white cell count is low when the cases turn severe. Neutrophils, CRP, ALT, and LDH in this study also show a rise. And their conclusion is that it is the levels of LDH, CRP, ALT, and neutrophil numbers can be used to predict the result of RT-PCR, as that will save resources. Now, which means that they have taken the samples for RT-PCR tests, and while they are awaiting that, they are utilizing this data, which can save them resources. There is another interesting study from China in which they are using neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, platelet to lymphocyte ratio, a combination of NLR and RDWSD, or NLR and red cell distribution with CV format also. And what they found, of course, here there is at the bottom of this slide is a formula of how they calculated the combined area under control curve, and they found that individually NLR and PLR parameters do help in separating the severe from moderate groups. So there is a utility. But when they combined the data of NLR with RDWSD, that gave them the best separation when the cutoff was decided to be more than 1.046, then the patient is worsening. And if the combined ratio is less than 1.046, the patient is likely to be improving. So therefore, this is also an interesting way of looking at the basic available data. So having quickly gone through some published data, let us summarize what I feel we should be doing. I would say, if based on these previous studies that we have gone through, majority of the COVID-19 patients who are positive have shown lymphopenia and elevated C-reactive protein, so which are the infection-related biomarkers. Neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, a well-known marker for systemic inflammation and infection, has been studied as a predictor of bacterial infection, including pneumonia. So when the situation is worsening, NLR can be very useful because it will rise above the normal upper limits. Increased NLR was seen in severely affected COVID patients as compared to the milder group. Absolute lymphocyte count, ALC, approaching less than 0.6 per 10⁻⁹ per liter could be used as a criteria for admitting the person to the intensive care unit and start with supportive care. Because if you have this data available, and the other parameters are also correlated, it is possible that the person is worsening. So therefore, absolute lymphocyte count also can be looked at. And notably during the hospitalization, this situation is useful. So intensive care patients tend to develop neutrophilia, and absolute neutrophil count could peak to as high as 11 to 12,000 per microliter, compared to just about 3.5 per 10 raised to 9 liter per liter in the non-ICU group. Hospitalized patients could be monitored using the data derived from NLR and RDWSD or NLR and RDWCV. So these are the summary of what we have gone through today. And in conclusion, detecting COVID-19 is of course the current priority, but let's not forget that there are many other disorders and diseases which deserve detection, even in the times of COVID pandemic. Complete blood count is not a diagnostic test for COVID-19, but since it is always included in the basic evaluation and CBC results are readily available, therefore it is the right thing to do and optimize the data which is available. It makes big sense. Blood count data is easily available on hematology analyzer. Even 3-part differential analyzer, the smaller models, which are also used widely in India, are available in diffuse smaller towns, as I said. Results from other routine laboratory tests are also available, and correlation of that data with clinical data would give us this opportunity of using the basic things first. And in these challenging times, it is very important for all of us to publish our data. I could not find published data of Indian origin, but I'm sure that all of you and many others who are not participating in this webinar are definitely focused on it. And once this kind of data is available, that can become a useful tool for making a prospective diagnosis in strained resources situation. I don't think COVID is going to go away so soon, and therefore we need to utilize all available resources and in the best manner possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Parikh, for the very extensive and very insightful presentation. It has been a very enriching and knowledge-filled session and presented with simplicity. We are open to question now. So participants, in case if you have any questions, you can please type those questions in the comment box at the right side of your screen. We have received a few questions here. Probably, Dr. Parikh, I would like to raise those questions here. The first question is from Dr. Amrita. Can these CBC parameters be used to diagnose a COVID-19 virus infection?
The answer is no. We cannot use it to make a diagnosis of the infection. They are supporting data. It is not diagnostic data.
Okay. The second question that we have is from Dr. Sukhant. Can these results of CBC and other tests you mentioned be used right away?
Yes, I imagine that these tests are already being done even by the centers which have been approved by ICMR, and therefore I'm sure they are doing it, but we have not seen their published data. But if they are not, they should be using it. And if they are, then we should wait till they publish their data. But as I said a little earlier before closing the talk, is that this is not going to go away. So this infection has to be dealt with every available resource. And CBC data definitely plays a very important role because it is always done for making a diagnosis or monitoring the treatment.
Right. All right. And there's another question from Dr. Neerav. Are the CBC parameters you mentioned in your talk available in only high-end hematology analysis, one such as 5 PDA variety, or all types?
The parameters that we included today in the discussion are available on almost all analyzers, whether they are high-end, fully automated, or 5 diff analyzers as they are called, or 3-part differential analyzers also. So I think the option to use them is available to every analyzer user, whether it is a small end analyzer or high end.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
It's another matter that these small end users may not have any access to an approved lab to send the COVID test sample while they are doing the CBC. But let's remember that the blood counts are being referred, the blood patients for blood counts are referred every day, even when they do not have any suspicion about the COVID infection, but they have other maladies which need to be detected. So therefore, blood counts are available. And if the laboratory looks at the data carefully and tries to correlate it with what is prevalent in that area, then perhaps even before it is suspected, we may start sensing some trouble.
Right. All right. Any further questions? I believe. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Dr. Parikh, once again for the highly energetic and very live session for us. Thank you, dear participants, for your very active participation in the session. We look forward to you being continued partners with Agape in the welfare of mankind by fighting this pandemic. Thank you all once again for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.